I'm still quite incredulous about the whole hybrid program thing, so I thought I'd bring this guy Carlo through and see if he could sort things out for me. Good day and the most joyous greetings to you, Earthlings. It's a pleasure to be here again and to talk to you and interact to you in this beautiful co-creation known as time in your language. I am Carlo of the Essassani civilizations, and I am present and have been requested to speak about the hybrid program and to explain to the channel and maybe someone else who may be interested the nature of the process and the enterprise of this whole program known as the hybrid program. The hybrid program was initiated in your timeline in the 1950s. This does not mean that there were many precursors to it before, and what you know as the succubus or incubus from your medieval mythology, these entities that would steal the sexual energies of humans as they were sleeping. This is a hark back to the hybrid program. These sexual energies are in different technological perspectives, such as were used by the Greys to initiate the hybrid program. They are very densely layered with information that can be used to unfold other realities and perspectives into existence. You may know this from your own experience when you come across some type of unknown information that totally blows your mind, so to speak, in your colloquial language. You may find that your world changes entirely, and you are then able to create or attract very different types of realities and manifestations into your own universe of perception, the totality of the world that is you, all that is. And so the Greys were able to do this, and from your perspective, it was out of necessity. And this is true that we rarely, higher dimensional beings, rarely infringe upon other species unless it is out of some sort of necessity. You also know this, although realize that every rationality is dangerous because every rationality always comes with its own subset of evidential premises that seem to prove, so to say, this manifestation of your reality. But for the Greys, this was necessary in the sense that their biological shape was no longer able to continue. The Greys had, like you are approaching, but in a different manner, already mastered the sense of transferring parts of their consciousness to technological apparati, such as their computers, machines, spaceships, other entities. These were already semi-conscious, and it was discussed between the Greys whether or not they were not they would simply have to discard their bodies, but not being spiritually advanced enough to make the transition into ethereal or non-corporeal type of conscious existence. They instead were discussing between themselves whether or not they would not simply try to transfer as much as their selective consciousness into their machine creations and the hypernet that was controlling these machine or operating these machine creations with the instructions from the Greys. And so in a different timeline than the hybrid program, some of the Greys went in this direction and created an Earth that is entirely mechanical. Um, However, we shall not dwell on this unless someone asks us to provide more information in that matter. What happened in the hybrid program in the 50s then were, from many of your famous abduction experiments, that at first the Greys, also our ancestors, were prodding the human genome to see what kind of things could be made from it. And some of these first hybrids were in a sense like your mules or your ligers or other type of such cross species. They were infertile breeds. They were not in themselves non-functional, and they did manage to incorporate some of the, let us say, grey hide-mindedness with some of the human, still more grounded connections, and the lengthy physiognomy of humans that allow for spiritual energies to pass around more freely than they do in the body of the Greys. But these were to not much use for the Greys, and so in some of your abduction experiments, there were people who were oh yes, this is unpleasant transferring we sense to the human perception, but there were humans who were forced to mate with some of the first hybrid programs in order to see if there could be created hybrid offshoots directly on your timeline as humans. But what often happened was that these people were who underwent these experiences were so heavily traumatized, and apart from that, they had to deal with a sort of unwanted pregnancy. At least it was not understood at this point by the Greys either, that this might, in your culture or social circumstances, may create some trouble from these women who were returning pregnant from these endeavors. Some of the female hybrids on the spaceships who were attempted impregnated by male adoptees under often under coercion, but however this was also a chance for the Greys to try to experiment with understanding the sexual drives of humans, because these of course had been lost on the Grey timeline, and this was one of the reasons that they were having such a hard time to reproduce. The Greys had long ago on their own timeline shifted to a matter of let us say mechanical reproduction, or at least yes, regulated or industrial reproduction, such as you may know it from classics such as Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. This type of regulated society was a precursor to the more technological world of the Greys, where they had lost both the ability in their genome to further replicate it through technological measures, but they had also completely lost the understanding of how what you say natural sexual energy and the spontaneous procreation of the species on this planet, how that operated in order to replicate and continue the codes of the respective genomes of the species. And so the Greys started interacting with this, and this resulted in some of the very horrible, often rape-like nightmares of some of your adoptees. It is of course also true that this depends on the personality of the character who was abducted, which the Grey didn't also understand fully at this point. So it was very difficult for them to approach this. And you may see a parallel in your abductee program to the expansion of the let us say, more paranormal sides of the psychological fields in your sciences in the 50s and the 60s, which then exploded into a more type of energetic outlet of spiritual massive energy in the 60s. The 60s was the decade in your timeline when the Greys started cracking the code, so to speak, of how to work the human genome, and they also were able to start interacting with people through other dimensions than pure abductions, seeing that humans at this point was opening themselves up to the Grey vibration. What was happening was that the combination of a high-tech society such as you saw it in the USA of the 1960s, combined with the spiritual endeavors or open-mindedness of the whole Summer of Love and 60s cultural revolution. This afforded a vibration that was accessible for the Greys to then enter into more dialogues, and so you also saw through the 70s and the 80s and up through the invention of and popularization of your internet in the 90s, you did see that ideas, material fused from the Greys or channeled from the Greys into the cultural subconsciousness of your planet was slowly being expanded and elaborated, and so they are our forefathers. They did a lot to feed this vision of a technologically expansive future into human consciousness. And you saw it, for instance, in the classic movies of Steven Spielberg in the 70s. We are thinking here of the Close Encounter, but we are also communicating images of the Blade Runner and of Cyberpunk and the novel Neuromancer by William Gibson. There are many numerous examples. We are also communicating images of disco light to the channel at present. So you see these flashing lights of the early digital revolution is very much a grey-like aesthetic, but mashed up with human sensibilities. At this point in the 70s, the hybrid program had unfolded to a degree that the Greys had managed to produce hybrids that were fertile, and first among them were us, the Essassani. We are in many ways very close to the human vibration in that sense, and the present human vibration, and that is why it is very easy for you to reach out and communicate with us and us with you. See, what happened in the 70s was in the 60s the Greys had managed to create the first of these fertile yes, so to speak, fertile hybrid races of their genome and your genome. And these hybrid races, and we are speaking of ourselves primarily in this context. We were then grown by the Greys in the hybrid program, but understand that we operate in a timeline where time is far more accelerated than yours, and therefore we were able to, in that instance, grow our civilization from the meager creations of the early hybrid program into the civilization that has been communicating with you since the 70s through several channels, and is now manifesting further and further into this reality. What is going on in our own civilization, and has been going on in that sense, is that we wish also to connect to this timeline, because we have ourselves grown out of many of our physical circumstances from this point where I am communicating with you. But we still enjoy to retain a somewhat sentimental connection to our roots or upbringings. So our, let us say, in a human perspective, egoistic or selfish reasons for remaining in contact is to us it is very important, as you may understand from your own emotional body, that it is important for us to remain in contact with our origins. And so we have a close tie to the gray energy, which has itself worked itself into other dimensions. And we also have a close tie to your energy being our origin energy, an energy that we identify very much with, because in these timelines where the great ascensional shift of your own planet and race is taking place, is a place where many hybrid races and many types of illuminated consciousness takes its offspring in its further traversing throughout the multiverse. And so when I present myself to this channel, I appear as a sort of slender light body streaming with jagged types of lightning from my body, but with a very friendly, benign, almost warm sun-like radiation to it. And this represents my energetic body, my soul body, having merged so much into my physical body, that these two are almost inseparable. But as you may understand, I have experienced that my name is, I explained that my name is Carlo, and I am a materials expert, so I do hold a very great fondness for materials in any type, subject, and form. And for this reason, I am very beneficial to contact in if you wish to seek guidance between or in concerning the relationship between energetic, let us say, energetic morphic fields that can be manipulated in the quantum dimension beyond time, and then the temporal dimension of manifested reality. I am in that sense a relay point or a way station for many of my race who have decided either to remain more anchored in the physical, or have decided to simply absorb themselves completely in the dimension of the non-physical. I am able to hold the energies of both, and in that sense I am very strong with materials and the geometry of structure and ritual, and how you can construct this to find a greater delight, purpose, direction in connection to the joyful will of your unfolding life. I will leave you with this advice at this point, sweet humans. I am Carlo. of the Essassani civilization, I am able to tell you a great many deal of things, and I wish you a great many deal of wonderful revelations upon your path this day of your time in this lifetime. May you be well till I see you again, sweet humans. Goodbye for now. Hi hi.